Okay, welcome everybody to Racial Perceptions, and tonight we are doing episode number 4, I believe. And so tonight our conversation is going to be focused on the perspective of the Black man in America. So again, my name is Winnie.
Hi, and I'm Cartessa.
And tonight we have David joining us.
Hello, David.
Are you able to hear me, David?
Can you guys hear me?
Yes,
we just talked about this.
Yes.
Things happen. Yeah. So we're talking about the perspective of the Black man in America. And I just want to kind of hand it off to you, David, to start us off by sharing an experience that you had when we were in college about almost a decade ago now. So if you wouldn't mind sharing that experience with us to get us started, that would be awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. So it was me and 2 of my best friends. We decided that we were going to leave our university and head about 40 miles to Huntington, West Virginia. And we were going to go to a nightclub. So as we were getting ready to go, we decided to make sure we wore jeans because, if we have shorts on, sometimes they might not let you in. So we made sure we dressed appropriate. Got to the club and I had my Florida ID with me. So me and one of my other guys both had Florida IDs, and one guy had an Ohio ID. And so the bouncer told us, he wouldn't let us in the club because we had out-of-state IDs. And so as we're walking out, one of my white friends was like, why aren't you going into the club? And I was like, they won't let us in because we have out-of-state IDs. And he was like, well, I have a Texans ID, so they won't let me in either. Ends up going through the line and everything's fine. And so me and my buddy were walking down the street and we're talking to each other and we're having this exact same conversation. We should get t-shirts that say, we're just here for a good time. We want to dance with some girls. We're not going to start any drama and we're going to go home. And so we're just talking and making jokes about it. And so as we're having this conversation, me and my buddy, we walk across the street and the third guy who was with us, he's on the telephone. So he walks to the crosswalk where a group of police officers are at. He is on the phone. Police officers don't say anything to him. He walks across the street, walks back up to us, and then all of us go down this dark alley. As we're going down the alley, we hit the end, and I was like, do you guys hear dogs barking? And everybody was like, no, what are you talking about? And honestly, to me, it was like I blinked, and I opened up my eyes, and there were flashlights, assault rifles, guns, and dogs. So I can't tell you how many police officers were in there, but basically they all pushed us up against the wall and told us to freeze. So immediately we did exactly what we were told to do. We had our hands up in the air. We were all frisked by 3 different officers with, 3 distinct kind of personalities. And so, they're frisking us. And then, one of my buddies, he has a bag of gummy bears in his pocket. So they were like, if you guys have any drugs on you, we're going to take you to jail. And they're yelling, cussing, screaming, all this stuff. So they pull out this bag and he was like, what is this? And then it turns out to be gummy bears, no drugs. And so they, when everything kind of get calmed down, one of the police officers asked what we were doing out here. And I told him that we were going to go to this nightclub, but they wouldn't let us go because, they weren't letting Black people in the club. And he was like, they really do that here? And I was like, yes, officer. Why are you guys stopping us? And then this police officer, he takes out his flashlight again, clicks it on, or excuse me, he says, you fit a description of a fight that just happened. And we were like, what is the description? He clicks on his flashlight, he shines it on my buddy, and he says, red shirt, blue pants. And then he kind of smirked and then walked back to his car. They didn't find any drugs on us. he definitely did fit the description. And if anything, if he did fit the description, he could have been stopped at that crosswalk. And he could have been stopped right then and there, as opposed to waiting until we came down this dark alley away from everybody else. So, so that's kind of my view. And so, the post that you end up reading on my Facebook that you're describing, it kind of goes into a little bit more detail, and probably is a little bit more articulate than the spiel I just gave you. But that's kind of like my experience. And we were in college at the time, so we are all three of us are like well educated. I have 2 bachelors and a master's. One of the guys that was with me has 2 bachelors, 2 masters, and the other one is currently in school to get his nurse practitioner license. So I think too often everybody sees the stuff on the media, and everything in the media always has 2 different sides. So it's one side, other side, and then the truth. And so I don't think a lot of people actually get to hear, a particular person like me who is like, Black, well-educated, and shouldn't have to go through these circumstances because, I don't have any criminal records. All the run-ins with the law, I would probably say 99.9% of them should never have happened to me, other than, that 1% where I was speeding, which was all on me. And those are the type of things that you expect. But you don't expect to get pulled over for being Black. You don't expect to, actually, I take that back. White people don't expect Black people to get pulled over just because they're Black. Every now and again, I do expect it, so.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and hearing you retell the story and knowing you and knowing the kind of person you are, it really upsets me because you think about it and it's like, the only reason that you guys went through what you went through was because of the way that you looked. It was only because of your skin color. So I'm wondering, for you, when you were going through that experience and even looking back years later, how does it feel for you to think about that? And of course, seeing all the things that are going on in the country right now and the stuff that has been going on, for a while now. How does that feel for you from the Black man's perspective?
So I would kind of go back and tell you how I initially felt. I was scared and I was pissed. I felt like there's no reason for this to happen to me. So at that time, I did naturally what anybody would do. I made a long Facebook post that had, some choice language, and I was out there expressing myself. And then I decided to take it down because I was like, okay, this is not the right way to go about it. And so as I, end up telling other people this story, I kind of turned it into a joke. And so there's a couple of funny punchlines I throw in. But I think now kind of looking back at that, one of the things that I was doing is to laugh and, to laugh to keep from feeling pain. So I was definitely kind of suppressing those feelings. But after, all the things that I seen in the media, and especially, there was a lot of people from the university that I went to, which was primarily white, who saw that post and was like, oh, I'm sure that, they didn't, just single you out because you were Black. I'm sure there was something else, but I can't believe that happened. What else was going on? And so, I can remember, thinking about it and they completely discredited my experience, my feelings, because there was no reason for me to be pulled over. So I think it was, initially, some fear, some anger, then some repression. And now that I'm a little bit older and I'm able to share my experience, and I just want other people to know that, just because you see, X, Y, and Z person on the media who has this large track record and, they did X, Y, and Z, and they could have, did whatever they did. Police officers should be able to handle situations differently depending on the person that they're dealing with. You were dealing with 3 highly intelligent, highly articulate individuals who just wanted to go to a nightclub and go dancing. But instead, you turn that into an experience where there was a lot of fear. And I will never trust anybody from that police department. And that's my experience that I had because of those officers who just, did all that stuff for no reason.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I think that first of all, I think that it's grateful that you're okay in that. And I mean, I know that that is like so petty kind of to say or minor to say, but thank God that you were able to
Right.
walk away from that situation. Thank God that it didn't escalate to a point where you were no longer with us for no reason at all. When I hear your story, I think about all the other Black men that, like you, sir, were profiled and racially and treated unfairly and unjustly. And Elijah McCain, I don't know if you guys know who that is, but man, it just broke my heart. I think I cried for weeks. He was just walking home in the cold weather, and it wasn't there, it just him walking home and he ends up dead at the hands of law enforcement. And there is just so much downplaying to that, that, oh, I'm sure if he would have been following the law, but he was.
Yeah.
I'm sure if he would have been doing what he, was supposed to be doing, but he did, and so I think that it's a sad place for us to be when you can tell me that story, and I know that you were racially profiled. I know that, and I don't have to say I'm sure something else could have been done. Um, I'm Black. I know what happened to you, and so my perspective is I'm glad that that's as far as it went.
Mm-hmm.
And I want you to be safe in the future because I know that it can happen again, even in today's day and age. And that's something that we all have to be mindful of.
Mm-hmm.
So thank goodness that you're okay. Thank goodness that you're still able to come and share that story of how that happened to you, and how we still have a long way to go in the plight for racial justice with our law enforcement all across the country. You're right. It shouldn't escalate. They should know how to handle a situation without any type of wrongdoing or foul play in any way. At least I think. Don't you, Winnie?
Yeah, yeah, I totally agree. And I want to pull in Lisa's comment. She said it's sad that as a young adult, a student at that, you had to go through that traumatic experience, David. And she also says we have to stop normalizing Black men being traumatized by law enforcement, period. And I think that Lise, what Lise just shared, her comment really expresses what a lot of us feel.
Yeah.
Especially, as Black women kind of watching these things happening to our Black men. We
And
have
it
black sons, Black family members, Black husbands, Black
Black
cousins,
nephews,
Black brothers.
yes, Black
Right.
sons.
So this feels like this collective experience that we've all been going through. So this kind of leads me into my next question for you, David, is as a Black man, seeing all of these things happening and thinking about your own experience with that, how do you feel like these experiences have impacted your mental health and the mental health of other Black men in this country?
Well, I think that's a difficult question, just because of my profession. So I'm a fellow therapist. I'm not sure if I actually mentioned that earlier, but as a therapist, I think one of the things that I'm pretty good about is doing self-care. They do a lot of preaching and teaching about that, and in our universities and stuff like that, for people who are in the social work, counseling profession, psychology profession. So I think I did a lot of stuff for my own mental health.
Mhm.
But as far as other people, I feel like a lot of other people would have struggled. And I say that because in the African American community, and I know that you guys kind of touched on this a little bit last week.
Mhm.
In the African American community, I can tell you that I know 0 African American men in my personal life who have a single diagnosis. And I would say that because they have never seen a mental health professional. So I can easily diagnose with, a wide gambit of disorders, but
Mhm.
none of them have been diagnosed. And most people don't see them. So I think the average person will be obviously traumatized. I think that, they get traumatized from seeing it on TV.
Right.
They get traumatized from reading it in books. Like I remember when I was, I think it was probably when I was about in 4th or 5th grade, and I found out what happened to Emmett Till. That just broke my heart, and that actually made me extremely scared. And even to this day, I'm terrified that something like that can happen to me or anybody in my family.
Mhm.
And most people are well, half the people are going to be listening to this Facebook Live session, and they're going to be like, "Who is Emmett Till?" And they're going to read it, and they're going to be like, "Oh my gosh, I had no idea." But when I wrote that post, I was like, I'm still mourning for him because I am. Emmett Till could have very easily been me, if I was born, back in his time. So I think a lot of Black men are obviously traumatized by it. So
Mhm.
And that frustrates me because we have a whole community of people that insist that this oppression and this trauma isn't happening to our Black men, our Black community, because women can be brutalized by law enforcement as well. It's happened.
yeah,
I think that how much do we need? We have Emmett Till, we have the lynchings that happened in the 50s and the 60s. We have Rodney King, the
Mhm.
first brutally beaten man that was caught on video. And then after that, you have a slew of injustices that are caught on tape, that are on tape. And so it just it just boggles my mind that we haven't done more to try to address this issue, that we still have people, members of Congress, government, that still insist that there's no racial injustice. There's no systemic racial injustice.
Yeah, it's really sad to me, but at the same time, I just kind of think about just other traumas. Just the fact that if you go into your churches and you talk to people in the churches and say, how many people in your churches have ever, been raped, sexually assaulted, they're going to say nobody in the church. But statistically speaking, in the literature that's provided out there, that is not true. There's just so much damage going on in our community. And where in the Black culture, we have this ideal of not snitching, not reporting things to the police, not talking to people about it. So in the Black culture, a lot of this stuff just gets swept under the rug. So what ends up happening is generation after generation, people are growing up not telling anybody, and there's generational trauma that never gets addressed.
Yes, I couldn't agree more with you. That is absolutely true. Absolutely correct. And that kind of makes me wonder if you've been able to recognize some of the barriers, that are keeping people from actually opening up and expressing these things and seeking help for their mental health.
Yeah, and you're gonna have to excuse me if I keep on touching on things that you guys touched on last
Oh,
week.
you're fine. That's okay.
But one of the things I think is normalizing feelings. And so I think in the Black community, I'm not sure if how many of the people in our audience had Black parents who spanked them, and then after they got done getting spanked and they were still crying, they said, you want me to give you something to cry for?
You want more?
Or I give you something to cry about.
But I mean, I just think that we have to normalize feelings, which we don't do. And then the other thing is it's to teach us Black men that it's okay to show emotions.
Yes.
And, I'm thinking about like me as my emotions. I can't, it's hard for me to show emotion at different workplaces. So I'm lucky and blessed enough to work at the place I am now because I'm able to show a wider range of emotions because, the people that I work with now can handle those emotions. But prior to that, like any of the emotions that I showed automatically became aggressive. Even though it was common sense. So one of the experience that I had is, I was on a on-call system, and I was just talking to one of the girl who was the lead at that particular time. I told her that it would make more sense for me to go to hospital A because I can go to that person because they needed to be seen immediately. Meanwhile, the person who was like, my backup call could have went all the way down, and they didn't need to be assessed until like 7 or 8 o'clock later on. So I was telling her, and it made the most amount of sense. And I told it to, some of my coworkers, but everybody in leadership, they said, "Oh, you were being aggressive. You were being hostile." And I was like, "No, I was telling her what was the best ideal at that time. You know what I know. It's like common sense, but at the same time, I'm the one being punished because I'm advocating for, my clients, and I'm advocating for the best possible solution for our company." So my advocation for myself or for my clients automatically becomes aggressive and hostile.
I think that's something that, Black men and Black women both have in common. I think that that's a barrier for both of us. We were talking about that last week, again, how we get perceived as being aggressive. And it's not our intentions at all. Sometimes, like you said, we could just be trying to get a message across. We could just be trying to relay the best plan or method. And then even in situations, where we have the expertise to give the opinion, to give the say so, to, make the call, it's still, not recognized, it's not respected, and we still have to follow a unspoken guideline of how we speak, how we present ourselves, and to make sure that we're not coming across in a way that will come back on us as being aggressive. So I think Black women and Black men, share that strife. And I'm sorry that it is that way because it should not be. There should be a way that we should communicate without it being taken aggressive. But I think that is, it just comes from that systemic fear, which, baits that racism. That, I think it just all goes, I think it's cyclical. I think it all goes together with don't act like that because that's too aggressive. And that is, something that I'm not comfortable with and something that reminds me, that you are Black. And that's something that's where we have to draw the line. That's where the boundary has to be. It's all great as long as you look as much like me as possible, speak as much like me as possible, act as much like me as possible. But, show anything that highlights, your greatness, your magic, your, wonderfulness. I don't any other great pronoun I can give the Black community. Then it's looked at, negatively, especially in the professional community. I think that that's unfortunate.
And this reminds me of our conversation last week, Cartessa, when we were talking about, some of the perceptions of the Black woman within a professional setting. And that makes me wonder for you, David, as a Black man, have you been in situations or have you felt like you needed to kind of change who you are so you could fit into this, I don't know, this professional package? So you're not like singled out as, oh, that Black dude or Black, that Black man over there. Like, just tell us, if you wouldn't mind, about, what that experience has been like for you as a Black man in a professional setting.
Yeah, so I'm glad you asked that question. I've been thinking about this a lot. So one of the things that I don't think I have nearly that trouble as most people, because my mindset about like, pursuing different advancements or like, job changes and stuff like that, I feel like I know how to work the system. So anytime that you see me with a haircut, my hair is super long right now. It's normally not this long, but I'd have my hair cut. I'd shave all of my facial hair off and I'd take out my ears. Just because that, I want to fit into this, tight corporate box. I shouldn't have to do that. And so it's really interesting because, I know this gentleman who was super qualified for all these positions that he was going to at a local hospital. Um, he had all the experience, he had the educational background, everything. But when he would go to interview, he would dress like it was Easter Sunday. So, the guy looked great, but I mean, he was, in like, really loud shirt. He had a bow tie instead of a regular tie on. And, he ended up never getting any of these jobs. And so I, had this conversation with this brother and I was like, hey man, fit inside this corporate box. Once you get this job, then kick down the door. Wear your bow tie, put your earrings in, wear your gold chains. Like, as long as it's professional and it fits inside that particular box that you have to, you still have to maintain that corporate image. But like, wear what you want to wear as soon as you get that job. But at the same time, it shouldn't be like that. You should be able to wear whatever you want, whenever you want, as long as it's appropriate for that job.
Mm-hmm.
Another situation for somebody in my family, she finished at the top of her particular class. And so she had the best grades in her whole entire class. She used to hold study groups for her class, and they used to come over to the house and study with her. She would help train everybody. This is when they were applying for her EMT license. She never got a call back, even though everybody in her class, majority of them being white, all got these jobs. She had dreadlocks. So when you guys were talking about your sister locks last week, I was like, oh my gosh, like I can totally relate to that. I can see where that's going. But like when she cut her hair, she ended up getting a job. And that shouldn't be the case because dreadlocks by no means are inappropriate. I mean,
They're not.
But
that makes me so upset. I was in the Army and I was in active duty and I was on I was at my duty station and I get called into the sergeant major's office and there was a young lady in there and she had these long, beautiful, and I remember seeing her around post like before and thinking, look at her beautiful hair. And of course, like I said, in the African American culture, that having dreadlocks and having them grow long, that's like a revered hairstyle. That is it's beautiful. So it's really looked at pleasantly in the Black community. However, she had to cut them and she just cried and my heart just broke for her because I knew what she was cutting. She was cutting her pride, she was cutting her hard work, she was cutting her hair, something that a white person would never have to do, never in a million years. And I that event traumatized me because that was racial profiling and racial discrimination at the hands of the federal government. And I just every time I hear the story or I hear of someone they recently allowed dreadlocks in the Army now. So about 4 years ago, they changed the regulation. And so someone did realize that it was, racially that was just wrong to do. And luckily they changed that. However, many stories about people that have dreadlocks and I don't understand it. And I know that from my perception, I'm going to look at dreadlocks differently because I am Black. So I'm going to see the hairstyle as a different, in a different way. I know how long it takes to do. I know what it takes to keep up with. I know how long it takes,
how expensive it is.
Yeah, how much it costs to do, how long it takes, and then they just grow so long. People have really put in their work there. That's like it's a mark of beauty. So hearing those stories, and men too, Black men have dreadlocks as well. And I remember a couple of years ago seeing a wrestling match, and a young boy had to cut his dreadlocks to wrestle at the match. So, and I thought that that was horrible. That was like that was a big deal. So yeah, I hate hearing stories like that. That's just so, and then it goes back to, we understand how unfair it is. We can, talk, you, myself, Winnie, and David. Now we can talk about how this is, we're getting mistreated. However, we can go two people down from us and, oh no, that's not racially unjust. I mean, that's not racial injustice. That's just trying to have upkeep, or that's just professionalism. Who are you to say what's professional for a whole different culture of people?
Yeah.
That's privilege. That's privilege. That's egocentricity. It's just all these things wrapped up into the racial oppression that goes on in this country. Just another example. I'm sorry, I kind of went on a rant. Go ahead.
Oh, you're fine. Lise has a question for you, David. She asks, as a Black man, do you experience microaggressions in the workplace?
It depends on my workplace. Not right now. I think that one of the good things about my group is like everybody in my group is well informed, and so one of my coworkers were actually talking to me about this, and I was like, I'm really nervous to, speak in front of God knows how many people. But she's like, that's awesome. You should share it to like everybody in your company because like, we really want to learn more. So in my profession, it's not so much, but at this job, it's not so much. But in previous jobs, yes. Like I said, with like, me talking loud and even though I was like really passionate about like, making sure that my clients got the best care possible, but not so much at my current job.
So do you have an example that you can share of a microaggression that you experienced in the workplace before?
You're putting me on the spot. I'm going to have to come back to
it. I'm sorry. We can come back to it.
Don't put him on the spot, Winnie.
Sorry to put you on the spot.
I know that there might be just have to have a Black man that is a counselor, that that's a licensed professional, is just about 1 in a million. And I know that I would hope that my hope would be that there aren't any barriers to them actually treating their clients. But I think about and I know that this probably sounds outrageous, but I think about maybe wrongful accusations against Black men that are counselors, or being wrongly accused of something, or just kind of something like that happening to them. Not to say that it would, but it's just something that Black men have a history of carrying that burden of being wrongfully accused of the most horrific things, and later on down the line, finding out Mr. Emmett Till, you used him earlier, a great example of someone wrongly accused, paying the ultimate price, and then find out later that it wasn't true. Not even that the people come forward and retract their stories. So when I think about Black male counselors, that's something that sticks in my mind. Thank goodness it's never happened. And like you, David, all the Black male counselors that I've encountered have been the highest professionals, and I think that they're dire. We're in dire need of them in our community, our African American community, and I think about that in regards to just that burden that they carry that's with that whole systemic racism. It just kind of goes with that, and I worry about that sometimes. That's not a microaggression, but that is a concern that I do have.
Well, that's a concern I do have as well. And so one of the things that I always try to make sure that I did is, like, if I was at all worried, I would always talk to some of my female counterparts, and I'd say, hey, me and X, Y, and Z, we're going to be in this room. I want you to occasionally walk past, and I just kind of like make sure that they knew that I was in that room with that person. That way, there would be no questions asked about it, But as African American men, men therapists in general, but especially me being Black, I feel like I had to be double cautious, and I have to dot all my I's and cross all my T's. Because if I don't take care of myself, I know that I'm easily disposable for some people.
Right. And not saying that it couldn't happen, something like that, like a false accusation couldn't happen to a white male therapist. I just worry about the outcome because of the justice system and how that would be, like getting fair treatment. And I just these are things that I worry about with the Black male counterparts that I do have, because I know that is a burden that they have that Black women don't necessarily carry, which is I can push that over to the whole African American community. Getting falsely accused of crimes is something that historically Black men have had to carry. White women or Black women more so have to carry the burden of having crimes committed against us and not, having justice served on our behalf. But that's as well as Black men too. So they kind of get, Black men kind of get that double binded situation.
Right.
Which, and if I were a Black man, I can't even tell you where my mental health would be. And that's another reason to push so much. If you're watching this and you're a Black male and you feel like you need to talk to anyone, if you want to reach out to anyone, we have Black clinicians. We are there. We are ready. We want to hear what you're saying. We want you to talk to us. We want to try and talk about anything that you'd like. Because I just couldn't imagine having these very real threats going on and still, functioning. Like, look at you, David, you're, very, very high functioning, could you imagine, let's double down on that pressure. Could you imagine being like the president of the United States and still having to worry about being falsely accused of something? Or, these are very real threats, and I can't imagine what it would do to someone's mental health.
At the sake of getting too political, I think that is interesting that you brought him up, because he's the only person I know who went to a Christian church for 20, 30 years and got accused of being a Muslim, and as opposed to the current president who never went to church, and now he's the greatest Christian in the world. I think that shows a stark contrast of where our country is.
Yeah.
So how do you feel like us as Black women in general, and even other members, of the Black community, or even our white colleagues who are fighting alongside us for social justice and trying to end all this racial injustice stuff, it's so frustrating and it's so overwhelming. How do you think that we as a community, as a body, can come together to help support, Black men and help support the members of our community who are the most vulnerable and who can easily, end up on the 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock news? Like, how do we support Black men? How do we support you guys?
Um, One of the first things I would say is, when a Black person tells you about their experience, believe them. Um, I don't think that, like, there's no glory behind me sharing my story.
Mhm.
Um, my intent for, like, sharing that story on, it's probably one of my most liked posts, but like, I don't really care about likes. That doesn't, it doesn't matter to me at all. But what the thing that I wanted is, I wanted people to see my story and believe me and believe other people when they, start to tell their truth.
Good for
Mhm.
you.
So I think, a safe space
Good for
for
you.
Black men to know that they come and share their experience, it's exponentially important. I can't even tell you, like, because especially with, especially when I'm working with, like, some of these Black teens, they have no place to go. They have no place to turn. They can't, talk to their uncles about, like, oh yeah, I was crying at school because my friend died. Their uncle's gonna be like, okay, suck it up, or they just won't be able. They won't be prepared to, like, be that vessel for all those emotions. So any chance that you get an opportunity to be a vessel for that person, by all means, go ahead and do it. The other thing I would do is say is, I think the power to vote is extremely important because, like, these things aren't going to change if you're only voting for the president. Because, you can vote for the president all day and all night, but, like, things aren't going to change in your local community. You have to vote in every single election, and you have to get involved, and you have to let people know exactly what you want.
Mhm.
One of the best things that I've heard, like, with the whole police department reforming and stuff like that, was happening over in Covington, Kentucky. What they were doing is, anytime there was a mental health crisis that 911 got called out, they would have they had their own mental health officer who had a background in mental health or had a social worker right alongside with them. And I think stuff like that, like, if you are asking your congressman, your city councilman to make these changes in your police department, like, the only way that those changes are going to happen is if you vote and you let your, whoever is in charge of your particular district know these things.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, those are definitely great recommendations, and I agree. The change starts with us, and this kind of reflects, what we said last week on the video is that we're often asking other people to make changes, and we want all of these different things, and we're sometimes just kind of waiting and expecting things to happen, but we actually need to start somewhere, and that somewhere is with us. It starts with us being willing to, um, move things forward. And so we've been trying to do that with this platform, trying to create, a safe space for us to talk about a lot of these things. I mean, they're very much uncomfortable, they're difficult topics, but I would challenge, everyone watching to do the work. It starts with you. The change starts with each and every one of us. So that being said, we're getting near to the end of this episode. Cartessa and David, do you guys have any last minute things that you want to add?
Oh no. Thank you so much, David, for coming and sharing. It was
Thank you for having me.
and I know that you'll go out and do great things, and just good luck out there and be safe.
Hmm.
Be safe.
And we would love to have you back if you're available. You're always welcome back.
Always welcome back, please.
Yeah.
Anytime.
I definitely will.
All right, awesome. So we will see you guys next week, Thursday, same time. We also have a bonus episode that we're working on for you guys. So yeah, watch out for that. So thank you guys so much. Thank you, David. Thank you, Cartessa, and thank you everyone who watched the live and who engaged with us. Please be sure to share the video with your friends and family, and so we can continue these conversations and continue doing the work. So bye.
Bye, guys.